Alright, we've got some sweet incense fragrances to talk about today, and you know, I really enjoy sweeter fragrances, and I've mentioned that incense in general can start smelling or experiencing very, very cold. So I like my incense fragrances to be with a lot of warmth, and that's what exactly these fragrances are today. I've got 12 of them in this video we're going to talk about, so if you're curious to learn about these fragrances, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yeah, today we're talking about incense fragrances that are sweet. Not the ones that don't have like the ambery notes or the sweet notes like vanilla or honey, but the ones that are just resinous and focusing on the Olibanum or frankincense, which to me is a very, very cold note. It's a little difficult to wear incense on its own, and to me, since I grew up Christian Orthodox and went to church a lot and smelled a lot of incense at the church, I feel like I don't really like to wear just incense on its own. Originally I did, but I kind of have fallen out of love with it. But when the addition of sweeter notes are contrasted with that incense or resinous notes of Olibanum or frankincense, then I really, really enjoy them. And that's what these fragrances are. We're going to go ahead and get started with a fragrance called Royal Incense from OMANLUXURY, this one right here. Wonderful, sweet incense fragrance. It's royal incense and it features notes of honey, and the honey and the incense in this fragrance, the frankincense note, compete with one another, so you've got an equal amounts of incense with honey, so it sweetens up everything, makes it warm and a lot more enjoyable to wear. So fragrances like Comme des Garçons Avignon was a fragrance I enjoyed once. I wore quite a bit of it. Way back to like towards the end of the 2000s is when I started wearing that. But it's become a little too cold for me and I want my warmth. In addition to the incense and honey here with Royal Incense, there's amber, there's cedar, there's musk, there's geranium, some pink pepper, lily, vetiver, and of course there's some leather as well. It does become a bit leathery here with this particular fragrance upon its dry down, but I like that whole incense contrasted with the sweet honey and the ambery touches in here as well. So I feel like there's also a bit of rose in here. It's got a bit of a rosy presence, and as I mentioned in a previous video, I think the geranium is kind of coming off a bit like rose in here, so which adds a very, very unique contrast in the fragrance. And one last thing I should say that I mentioned also once before, this does remind me a little bit of Kilian's Incense Oud. So if you like that fragrance, you might want to check this one out. It's OMANLUXURY Royal Incense. Alright, up next, going to the house of AMOUAGE. This is Royal Tobacco, and I'm featuring it here in an incense video because for me this is a very resinous incense tobacco fragrance, and actually more focusing on the resins and the frankincense note than the tobacco for me. That's what I get with this one. You know, I also get a bit of a Christmassy vibe. When you first put your nose to the fragrance up top, there's definitely like a green Christmas tree smell, like pine, but I think we're getting that from the there's a licorice in the notes here, and I believe there's some anise as well. Maybe the fenugreek is also giving us that kind of a green Christmas tree vibe as well. But this is all very frankincense forward. Along with cardamom, there's anise, there's licorice, there's basil, there's tobacco, along with prunol, which is plum note, and then there's fenugreek, vanilla, Peru balsam, benzoin, labdanum, and myrrh. Eventually, it's a very ambery fragrance, but also smoky with the frankincense here. And then, of course, tobacco does come in, but I feel like this is not acting like a very big tobacco fragrance. It's more about the resins, the frankincense, the spices, and then of course the ambery touches. So it's AMOUAGE Royal Tobacco. That's the second fragrance we're talking about. Then going to the house of YSL, it's BABYCAT, this one right here. For me, BABYCAT is an equal amount of Olibanum or frankincense or incense with vanilla. And this particular fragrance, unlike Oman's Royal Incense, this is more dry. There's definitely a dryness here, so we do have a lot more dry vanillic experience here with this particular fragrance in comparison to the Royal Incense. They're both sweet incense fragrances, but I get a little more sweetness with the Royal Incense, I'm sorry, with the Royal Incense, not Royal Tobacco, in comparison to the BABYCAT. But it's vanilla with Olibanum. There's black pepper, there's saffron here, cedarwood, suede accord, Elemi resin, pink pepper. So it's eventually very, very peppery. The black pepper and the pink pepper, you know, accentuates the incensey frankincense touches in here, or the Olibanum in this case, they mention, along with the vanilla. But sweet and dry at the same time. And it's a sweet incense fragrance, which makes for a much easier wearing experience, at least for me, and that's YSL's BABYCAT. I know YSL's BABYCAT is still pretty challenging to get. I hope you guys can find it. Hopefully they'll launch it in the States soon. And then up next, it's Laboratorio Olfattivo's VANAGLORIA, this one right here. And VANAGLORIA to me is also very similar to BABYCAT. Both are created by the same perfumer in the end. So it's pretty much the same experience here. It's vanilla with incense or frankincense or Olibanum together. So you've got that dry vanillic touch because it's contrasted with the incense Olibanum note. But in this particular fragrance, there's a bit of Tonka. There's also Saffron. There's Musk. But in the end, it's a sweet incense fragrance. For me, a bit gourmand, but not all the way. I don't think any of these really go gourmand to me. But again, you add the sweet, warm notes to the fragrance that features the incense or the frankincense, and you get a combination of the sweet incense fragrance, which makes for an easier wearing experience. So anyway, Laboratorio Olfattivo VANAGLORIA. It's a great alternative to BABYCAT. So if you can't find BABYCAT, make sure you go and try a sample of this to see if you like it, because it's basically almost identical to me. There might be some different changes or minute differences between the two, but both are created by the same perfumer and both very similar to me. Anyway, moving on to the next fragrance. Going to the house of MATIERE Premier, it's ENCENS SUAVE, this one right here. And this one is once again sweet incense, but for me this one is not as sweet as some of the other fragrances, especially the Royal Incense from OMANLUXURY. And again, this one also maybe faintly might remind you of BABYCAT a little bit, but in the end, it features lots of incense. There's Labdanum, there's Benzoin here, there's coffee and vanilla. When you see the notes of Labdanum, Benzoin, vanilla, you'll know that if it's contrasted with that incense, because incense on its own is pretty dry and cold, there's a coldness about it. And, the warmth from the vanilla, the Benzoin, and the Labdanum contrasted will make for a much easier wearing experience. I know you guys might enjoy wearing incense on its own. For me, I'm doing this kind of a video for you guys just so you can see what are the options out there if you like the idea of a sweet incense fragrance. But this one actually, yeah, it might remind you a little bit of BABYCAT as well. Definitely, it's kind of that same style. It has its own differences because this one also has the addition of coffee in the notes. But again, it's a wonderful combination of lots of incense with sweeter notes and makes for a great sweet incense fragrance. So ENCENS SUAVE from the house of Métier Noir. Moving on to the house of MEMO Paris, this is Tiger's Nest, this one right here. And then this, to me, I think kickstarted my reappreciation for incense fragrances, because when I first got into doing this hobby, I was really into like Comme des Garçons, and there was a few other fragrances like Full Incense from Montal, just focusing on incense, and it doesn't get sweet. I kind of got bored and tired of it because it reminded me of too much church. But now, whenever I see some sweeter notes with the incense, I really appreciate it. And this one does get really sweet and ambery, but it features incense along with amber, Tolu balsam, there's absinthe here, Aldehydes, vanilla, and papyrus. There's definitely a balsamic touch here from that Tolu balsam note, and of course amber, Tolu balsam creates for this very balsamic ambery experience, but it does have vanilla too, and then the aldehydes in here creates for this kind of fizziness, this lighter kind of a touch to the fragrance, and then the absinthe in here adds a bit of a light booziness as well. This is a great scent. It's very underrated from this house, Tiger's Nest from the house of MEMO Paris. Do you guys know that one? Do you enjoy it? Do let me know. Put a comment down so I can find out. If I didn't mention this already, this is an unranked list. These are all different kinds of fragrances, and I'm just giving you options here in this video. But the next fragrance I'm talking about is from the house of Serge Lutens. This is Fille Anagui. I speak about this one quite a bit. It's a very loved fragrance by a lot of people. A lot of people tend to like this one, and it's one of my favorite fragrances. I absolutely love it because it's pine and incense, so you got that kind of forest pine touch here, contrasted with the smokiness of the incense, and then it's sweetened up by dried fruits. In this case, they're not using vanilla or they're not using amber and things like that, although there is definitely an ambery touch here, but I think it's sweetened up by the dried fruits, which makes for a kind of a unique experience here with the pine, the fir, incense, and then dried fruits coming in to give it that kind of fruity sweetness. But there's also some spices here, a bit of bay laurel and vetiver, but a wonderful, wonderful fragrance. It makes for a great Christmas fragrance as well because it does smell like a Christmas tree forest and things like that. I love that kind of smell, and it's definitely really prominent scent here. So it's Serge Lutens Fianagi. If you guys don't know that one, definitely check it out. Alright, up next, going to the house of Atelier d'Azur. This is L'Armée du Desert, this one right here. This is a sweetened up incense fragrance with benzoin as a note, and the benzoin acts kind of a ambery, sweet and vanillic, contrasted with lots of incense. And there's also some bright notes like cypress in here. There's gaiac wood, there's woodsy notes, and of course cedar as well. But it's a very woody fragrance here, sweetened up with the benzoin, and incense comes in to add its, you know, unique layer of smokiness and its resinous touch. It's not necessarily gourmand. Once again, none of these fragrances really go gourmand for me, but it's definitely incense and woods here, sweetened up by this kind of resinous note of benzoin, which has very vanillic touches. So L'Armée du Desert from the house of Atelier d'Azur. It's at number 5, but this is not a rank list, by the way, guys. Okay, moving on to the next fragrance. It is Orza El Legrand's Rêve d'Océan, one of my very first loves from this house. I still have a very original bottle that you can decant. I bought this quite a long time ago. This is a wonderful fragrance in that it's a sweet incense fragrance. We're very resinous and balsamic. What's sweet in here is the benzoin and the apopanax, and then it's contrasted with lots of incense. Of course, this is smoky and incensey. It also features Elemi resin, there's aldehydes, there's pine, and cinnamon. Cinnamon adds a warm, spicy touch to the fragrance, and of course you've got a very ambery and resinous experience against the incense note in here as well. It's a really, really great fragrance. This one, again, once again, none of these are gourmand, and I feel like it can go gourmand, but it's the right balance of sweetness against the incense smokiness that it features the incense in here. So it's Rêve d'Océan from the house of Orza El Legrand, a wonderful, wonderful fragrance for you guys to check out. Up next, it's Javois La Liturgie d'Azur, this one right here, another really wonderful ambery, sweet incense fragrance. This one is not as sweet as the previous one, so we're kind of getting into some fragrances that don't go too sweet, but there's definitely some sweetness in here, and I feel like we get the sweetness from the labdanum and the myrrh note in here. But it's lots of incense. There's cypress here, there's olibanum, of course the myrrh and the labdanum, and then there's some green notes against it as well. This one to me smells more churchy than some of the other ones that we talked about today, but definitely lots of incense with sweeter notes, ambery notes, resinous notes. Beautiful fragrance, La Liturgie d'Azur from the house of Javois. Do you guys know that one? Do let me know if you are a fan of that one. The next one we're going to talk to you about is YSL's Caftan. We have 2 fragrances from this house and from the same collection, the La Vestiaire collection. So Caftan is more sweet and smoky, and this one does feature lots of benzoin. Benzoin is the star note in this one. Lots of benzoin with frankincense, and there's of course labdanum in here as well, along with styrax. There's musk, there's clementine note, and a bit of pink pepper to add more spice to the fragrance. So if you like the idea of benzoin and fragrances like Benjoin Bohème or Benjoin 19, maybe even Bois d'Harmonie from the house of Guerlain, you got to check this one out because it's kind of in those fragrance directions. So it's focusing on the benzoin, and of course the frankincense contrasts and cuts through the sweetness of the benzoin in here to create that smoky incense touch that is what we're talking about today. So YSL's Caftan is a great sweet incense fragrance. And then finally, the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is from the house of Atelier Oblique. It's Bohemian Woods, this one right here. And again, this is a sweet incense fragrance, but once again, it's kind of on the smoky side. Of course, we are talking about incense, so it does get smoky and also a bit boozy as well. We've got woods here, we've got leather, elemi, absinthe, red pepper, vanilla, iris, incense, saffron, and patchouli. So it does have earthy touches. It does definitely have some leathery undertones as well, but we've got the vanilla, and then we've got the absinthe to kind of brighten up and sweeten up this mostly woody incense smoky fragrance called Bohemian Woods. Bohemian Woods is my favorite fragrance from this house. I absolutely love it, and definitely a great recommendation for you guys. Do you guys know this house? I do have a whole video on the channel. Go catch that. And that's pretty much the last fragrance for you guys today in the sweet incense fragrances video. Let me know your thoughts on these fragrances, and do you have a recommendation for another sweet incense fragrance? Do let me know. Put a comment down below so I can find out. Other than that, guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.